So this cartoon, had a very important role to play in the transformation of the palm oil industry. Who could believe it? Who could believe a Michael Looney cartoon could have such an impact? And I'll quickly tell you the story. I was working with Wilmar, and the chairman and CEO of Wilmar, Mr. Kwok, fantastic human being, very wise man. But he was being challenged by the NGOs for the impact of the palm oil industry, in particular the fires that were raging in Indonesia, causing smoke haze throughout Indonesia, but also Singapore, where he lived, and up into Malaysia. People were blaming him for this, and he was like, well, none of our plantations are burning, but nonetheless, the plantations that were owned by the companies from whom he was buying were buying oil from people who were burning, often smallholder farmers. So he was getting a lot of flack. And this affected him. And so we started talking about this. Great work of Glenn Horowitz. I want to really mention Glenn. Put this pressure on Mr. Kwok to address these issues. And we did. And Glenn asked me to speak to Mr. Kwok, and we did. Glenn and I spoke to him, and Mr. Kwok shared with us his thoughts, and his team shared their thoughts over many months and many discussions. And we helped formulate a very powerful, far-reaching no deforestation policy, no exploitation policy, and no peatland clearance policy, these so-called NDPE policies. This was August, September 2013. Here we are now. I think it's almost 900 companies have such policies, not all implementing them effectively, but millions and millions of dollars being implemented to try and save forests. And what happened was, the industry were very worried about Wilmar going down this path, and they were pressuring Wilmar and Mr. Kwok not to do that. Stick with certification, that'll be the saviour. Well, it hadn't been. Forests were being felled, people were working in terrible labour conditions, all under the banner of the industry, and in some parts under the banner of certification. And I knew, and Glenn knew, and many others were suggesting that we need to go further. Mr. Kwok had really made clear his thoughts of what that further looked like, but he couldn't take that final step. And we discussed it. He knew the path. And I was there trying to help him take that path, as was Glenn. And finally, as we were getting to the threshold of a very important date, we'd said to the NGOs, December 5th was the deadline. Give us until then. So at the end of November, after much discussion, I didn't think we were going to make it. The rest of the industry was having the big pull. They didn't want Mr. Kwok to go out. They didn't want him to go out in front and make this big commitment. They were saying, oh, you'll be giving in to the NGOs. But in his heart, connected to his duck, his soul, he knew that he wanted to go that way. He didn't want to be linked to the extinction and the death and extinction of orangutans, or Sumatran tigers, or fires, or damaging people's lives. He knew it deeply. But we just didn't seem to be able to find that breakthrough. So finally, one day, I sent him this cartoon. And it says, at the top of the tallest building in the world sat the saddest man in the world. It was a bit of a risk to send this to him, as I was pretty much implying that he was this man. And it said, inside the man was the loneliest heart in the world. And inside the heart was the deepest pit in the world. And at the bottom of the pit was the blackest mud in the world. It's a pretty grim story. But then, as so often happens with Michael Looney's cartoons, the last frame gives us hope and lifts us up. And in the mud lay the lightest, loveliest, tenderest, most beautiful, happy angel in the universe. So things weren't so bad after all. So I sent this to Mr. Kwok, and I said, Mr. Kwok, you've shown me through all of our discussions that there's an angel in your heart, because so many people had suggested to me this was not the case. How could a leader of the world's largest palm oil company have a soul and be caring about animals and people? He just wanted to make money, right? But no, I knew the story to be different. And this is what I say about these other slides. I knew because I'd gone in without judgment. I understood that after much listening to him, I could hear what he had to say. And I knew there was an angel there. So I sent him this. I said, you have that angel. You're connected to it. Now you just need to act from that place. Make this commitment. Sign on to this commitment. and the world will change. And he agreed that he would. And on December 5th, the most far-reaching policy that any company had ever made in any sector was published, to much acclaim. Forests are still burning, but the palm oil industry led by Mr. Kwok, not all of them, but many of them are making this commitment to no deforestation and investing in it to try and bring change. And it really stemmed from the work that was done by Mr. Kwok himself to get connected to this place. So the moral of this story for me is tied in with the other cartoons, is by the virtue of the fact that Glenn and I were able to speak to Mr. Kwok from our place, from our beliefs, our values. It gave him permission to be connected to that place inside him and live from that place. And he was doing that, but he didn't get all the full picture of the environmental and social impact that were happening as a result of the palm oil industry. Once he became aware of that, he was able to cross that bridge and act. And I felt that was very courageous of him. But for you as a change maker, for you as a social or an ecopreneur, the big moment was having the courage to send such a thing, such a weird and strange thing, to the chairman and founder, CEO of the world's largest palm oil company. So you've got to have courage. You've got to take a risk. If you don't have courage and you don't take a risk, we won't get anywhere. Mr. Kwok could have written back to me or just ignored me and said, I'm never talking to that guy again, he's a weirdo. But he didn't, and I knew he wouldn't, because I know him to be a good person. And his heart was open. He just needed to acknowledge it and connect to that place. So this one is a profoundly important cartoon for me about the power of connecting to others and about the power of having the courage to take a risk to do that in a pretty non-standard way. We'd made all the business arguments for going no deforestation, no exploitation and no peatland, but it wasn't enough. And later I asked Mr. Kwok, what did you think when I sent you this thing? And he said, it just helped me look at the problem in a different way. Okay, so let's use poetry, let's use music, let's use art to bring people to that connection and find their own inner wisdom, their connection to that angel, which we all have inside us, and then be guided from that place. And as we saw in this case, incredible change can come if we can do that.